Now, while we want to avoid doing this too much, there's often times where we need to nest a for loop block inside of another for loop. And I'm going to show you that situation. So let's say we wanted to compare this array of letters with this array of letters, the word trouble and bubble, and we wanted to see how many of those letters were the same. Well, the process for that is going to look something like this. We'll start with the first character of trouble, so T, and we're going to have to compare it to B, and then compare T to U, and then T to B, and then B, and then L, and then E. After we do that, we're going to have to then start with R and do the exact same thing, comparing it to each one of these elements. This is where you're going to see a nested for loop. So I'm going to start with I at 0 to represent the 0th element of the trouble array. So I'm going to say int I equals 0, and then I want to continue looping through it until I reach the end of my trouble array. And each time I want to increment I. And that will give me a situation where I'll loop through each of the letters in the trouble array. Well, I'm now going to put a for loop inside of it. And notice that I'm not using I. I'm going to use the next letter, J. It's just a standard convention in programming to start with I as your iterator and then increment to I, J, K, depending on how many times you loop through things. Now I'm going to take J less than the length of the bubble array and then do another for loop inside of that one. So now I have I representing the character that I'm on for trouble and J representing the character I'm on for bubble. So now I can just say if the character for trouble equals the character for bubble that I'm currently comparing, then number of same characters is going to increment. So what is this code going to do? Again, it's going to start with I equaling 0, so that's T, and it's going to start with J equaling 0, which is going to be B. So trouble 0 equals bubble 0, that's going to compare T and B. But rather than going to this outside loop, we're going to loop around in this one for a while. We're going to compare T to J equaling 1, and then 2, and then 3, and so on until that first trouble character is compared to all the characters in bubble. Only then will we exit this particular block of code and go back to the outer loop. And this is how we can compare two sets of data by having an iterator for each piece that we want to go through and nesting them inside of each other.